Hey there, pastors and leaders. I want to share with you something that really excites me about churches and how we can aspire to be all that God's created us to be and to be the church to those around us. I want to ask you a question. Is your church a cruise ship or an aircraft carrier? Now, before I get into this, the first thing I want to tell you is that whether you have a large church or a small church, it doesn't really matter in the scheme of things because it's all about what your focus is and what the church is really aspiring to be. So I have nothing against mega churches. I think they're great. I think when they're operating in the fullness of what God has called them to be, it's just amazing what can be done because you are so big. I think there's some amazing things that you can do when you are small as well because of that really family community that you have there. And so no matter where you're at on the spectrum, I think that God can do amazing things. But there's a couple things that I want us to just be aware of, and it kind of outlines that in this illustration. And let me share this with you. Recently, my friend Emily told me she visited a church that was so big she needed a map to get around it. Coming from a relatively small church that meets in an elementary school, she was astounded at the sprawling church campus. The facility housed a restaurant, a coffee bar, a lounge, escalators, and multiple spaces, each with high-tech sound equipment. And mind you, all these things are totally okay. It's just when they become the focus and when that's what it's all about rather than reaching people for Jesus, then there's a problem. So there's escalators, there's multiple worship spaces, each with high-tech sound equipment. In the lobby, there's massive concrete columns, rose up 3 stories into a glass atrium, and sunlight streamed in to illuminate the hip and modern architecture. But the strangest thing, she said, and this is where I believe God's got a hold of my heart with this. She said the strangest thing was that this colossal building filled with a largely affluent congregants sat in a crowded urban area in a poverty-stricken neighborhood. As far as she could tell, no one from that neighborhood was present. The church reminded her of a cruise ship docked in a third world country. Man, it just hurts my heart because I know that that's not the heart of God. The walls even had a round fishbowl windows driving home the cruise ship effect. It's a funny idea to ponder a church that looks like a cruise ship. However, many American churches resemble cruise ships in more ways than just their architecture. People who attend cruise ship churches, much like cruise ship passengers, often come to be entertained and catered to by the staff, and very little is expected of these church attendees. In fact, they tend to rate the quality of their experience, the music, the sermon, and the way it made them feel, much as a cruise ship passengers rate their satisfaction with various aspects of their trip. Cruise ship churches tend to be internally focused on the needs of their regular attending members. The main goal in these churches, as on a cruise ship, is to keep the customer happy and the complaints to a minimum. Leaders in a cruise ship church focus on existing members rather than pursuing those that are far from God or encouraging others to do so. Very little of a church's calendar, training, or communication is spent on activities to reach the lost or help those in need outside of the church. Statistically, only 5% of most American churches' budgets are spent on missions and evangelism. Overall, there seems to be very little incentive or empowerment of church members to get off the cruise ship and use what they learn in the real world. There are, however, churches that are more like aircraft carriers. These churches are designed to empower all members to find their God-given purpose in life, to equip them and to send them on missions into the world to reach and serve those who don't know Jesus. Much like the crew of an aircraft carrier is all about launching military planes and equipping them to carry out successful missions. Did you know an aircraft carrier is the same size as many cruise ships, housing close to 8,000 people? A super aircraft carrier rises 20 stories above the water and stretches 1,092 feet from bow to stern. It's about as long as the 77-story Chrysler building is tall. But what distinguishes an aircraft carrier ship isn't its size. It's the efficiency on the flight deck. The crew of an aircraft carrier can launch a plane every 25 seconds, all in a fraction of the space of a typical landing strip. The mission pervades every aspect of the ship, from the pilot to the person who restocks the ship's vending machines. Everyone on a carrier knows his or her particular role and how it supports the mission to equip, prepare, launch, and receive aircraft back from their crucial assignments. And my prayer for you as you lead God's church is that you would really help equip those in your church to know that it's not about them, that it's about reaching the lost for Jesus. And when we all work together and use our gifts, our God-given gifts that God's given us, we can be the hands and feet of Jesus. And the church is a system. And just like any system that is out there, if one part of the system is not working properly, it messes up the whole thing. And so we all have to work together. And often what happens in churches is they get focused on other things that really do not matter, and they get caught up in that, and then they're not working together to accomplish the mission that the church is designed for. So I just want to encourage you to just help your people know what the mission is and what it's really about. Because it's not about the big buildings, it's not about all the technology. While that's helpful, it is not about that. It's about reaching people for Jesus.